Imagine building like a total masterpiece, something that takes thousands of people to create, requiring this massive coordination of sound and light and just human energy.
Right, a huge undertaking.
Exactly. And you spend all night experiencing it, and then the very second the sun comes up, you intentionally burn the only copy to the ground.
Wow. Yeah.
You actively ensure there is no record it ever happened. Because usually when we talk about history, there is this underlying expectation of permanence.
Oh, absolutely. We want ancient architecture.
Right. You dig up a Roman amphitheater and the stone is still there and the archaeologist just brushes off the dirt and says, there it is, that's where it happened.
Mhm.
We really like our history to leave a fossil record.
We completely crave that tangible proof. I mean, we want to touch the walls and know our ancestors stood in the exact same spot.
Exactly.
But stepping into the world of 90s underground music and youth culture, it means stepping into a historical landscape that is intentionally blank.
Which is wild to think about.
It really is. It is a cultural movement that went to extraordinary lengths to erase its own footprints, creating what is essentially a black hole for traditional historians.
So for you listening today, that is our mission for this deep dive. How do you preserve a culture that actively resisted preservation?
Yeah, it's a huge question.
We are pulling from this really fascinating column published by Monumental Movement Records, or MMR. The piece is titled Rave and Media, Archiving Unrecorded Music Culture.
It's a great read.
It really is. And if you have ever wondered how underground fleeting moments manage to survive in our current, hyper-documented digital age, this deep dive is going to fundamentally change how you view cultural preservation.
I think it'll definitely give you that aha moment about how history is actually recorded.
Totally. But to understand the modern rescue mission, we really have to start with the disappearance itself. Okay, let's unpack this.
Right. So the MMR column points us to the geographical roots of this phenomenon. We're talking about the underground scenes erupting across the UK, Germany, the Netherlands, and Japan throughout the 1990s.
Yeah.
And the defining characteristic of these global raves was their militant avoidance of media exposure.
Militant is the right word.
Yeah. The organizers and the attendees, they didn't simply forget to bring cameras to the warehouse. They actively banished them.
Reading through the source material, the best analogy I could come up with is that a 90s rave was essentially a massive collective Snapchat message.
Oh, I like that.
Right. It was a cultural event designed explicitly to be experienced in the moment and then instantly disappear into the ether. It's just such a jarring contrast to the, record absolutely everything mentality that dominates our lives today.
It really is. And taking that Snapchat analogy a step further, imagine a message where millions of people are viewing it from different angles, but nobody's allowed to take a screenshot.
Man, that's stressful.
Right. When the timer hits 0, all you have left is a massive global game of collective telephone. And what's fascinating here is the why behind this anti-media nature. It wasn't just an aesthetic choice. It basically boils down to 3 hard, pragmatic realities. First, you have the legal risks.
Because these were illegal parties.
Exactly. These were frequently illegal parties breaking into abandoned warehouses or setting up in remote fields, and they were heavily associated with illicit drug use.
Right, of course.
So documenting the event wasn't capturing memories, it was manufacturing criminal evidence.
Yeah, nobody wants a high-definition video of their legally questionable weekend activities broadcast on the local evening news.
Definitely not.
That pragmatic fear naturally created a veil of secrecy.
But beyond the legalities, the second reality was deeply ideological. There was a fierce, almost violent pushback against commercialism.
Like a real anti-corporate vibe.
Exactly. The guiding ethos of this scene dictated that this was not music for sale. It was not a product meant to be packaged, marketed, and consumed by the masses in a suburban shopping mall.
That makes sense.
And the third factor was a profound philosophical focus on the physical here and now. Distancing themselves from the media wasn't merely, an aesthetic preference to look cool or elusive.
Right.
It was their politics.
Wow, okay.
It was a conscious, deliberate rejection of the packaged, mediated world that society was rapidly becoming.
So because they succeeded so brilliantly at keeping the media out, the actual art evaporated the moment the party ended.
Poof. gone.
Yeah. And the text lists the specific casualties of this anti-media stance, and it includes things you would normally expect to find in a music archive.
Right, like the DJ sets.
Exactly. The DJ sets were lost because recording equipment was essentially banned from the DJ booth.
Yeah.
The VJ visuals, which, for anyone unfamiliar, are those live reactive video projections mixed in real time alongside the music, those were never saved. The intricate lighting designs vanish. But I actually have to push back on the column's underlying premise here. Yeah, isn't music at its core just audio? The source places massive emphasis on environmental factors. It talks about like the smoke in the air, the specific smell of the venue, the temperature of the room.
Yeah, the sensory details.
Right, but why should a music archivist care if the warehouse was uncomfortably sweaty? If you manage to track down the playlist, haven't you successfully preserved the music?
See, that assumption is exactly where traditional archiving fails this specific culture.
Really?
Yeah. The synthesis of the MMR column's main thesis is that the rave itself, the entire overarching phenomenon, was the work of art.
Oh, I see.
The art wasn't an MP3 file. It wasn't sheet music or a pristine studio recording. Standard music archives are perfectly designed to preserve notes and lyrics, but they fail entirely to capture the nonverbal communion between the crowd.
The vibe, basically.
Exactly. The text defines this as an art of experience.
Yeah.
If you are sitting in your quiet, climate-controlled living room listening to a perfectly engineered audio track, you are missing the artwork.
Because you weren't in it.
Right. The artwork was the suffocating heat, the blinding strobe lights, the specific sequence of tracks mixed in real time, reacting to a specific group of people that will never gather in that exact configuration ever again.
Wow. Yeah, you cannot put a drop of sweat in a museum display case and tell a visitor, here is the 1993 London Underground.
Exactly.
Even if you could technically preserve the physical sweat, it wouldn't transmit the feeling to the person looking at it.
And that presents a fundamental challenge to the very concept of an archive. I mean, how do you catalog a fleeting feeling?
You really can't.
Because traditional media, the major music magazines, the corporate record labels, the television broadcasters, they completely missed this underground world while it was happening. So there was a massive historical void.
Total blank space.
Yeah. For a long time, historians assumed this entire global movement would simply vanish into the ether without a trace.
Yet here we are sitting here talking about it, which means we do have archives today.
You do?
Traditional institutions completely dropped the ball, which means the rescue mission had to come from somewhere else.
It did. The rescue mission actually came from the culture itself.
That's cool.
Yeah, starting in the early 2000s, this grassroots DIY movement essentially took the archiving process hostage.
Nice.
The source details the specific digital platforms that evolved into this new, decentralized historical database. You have dedicated database sites like MixesDB and Discogs.
Wait, let's pause on Discogs for a second, because the text mentions people hunting down white label vinyl tracks.
Oh, yeah, the white labels.
Right. For anyone who hasn't spent their weekends digging through dusty record crates, a white label was literally a vinyl record pressed in tiny batches for working DJs, and the label in the center was completely blank.
Literally nothing on it.
No artist name, no track title. If you were on the dance floor and heard a song that changed your life, but you didn't personally know the producer who pressed it, finding that track again was like hunting a ghost.
Nearly impossible.
Yeah, so the fact that thousands of people are now coordinating on databases to identify these blank records is a monumental historical undertaking.
It really is. And then you add platforms like YouTube and SoundCloud to the mix.
Oh, right.
These became the primary distribution hubs for uploading old physical mixtapes. People were like digging into their closets, finding decaying cassette tapes of live sets and digitizing them.
I love that.
But perhaps the most crucial and honestly the most fascinating component of this rescue mission relies on Reddit, old internet message boards, and personal blogs.
Really? Just forums?
Yeah. This is the space where users are attempting the impossible. They are literally verbalizing their past experiences.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is where we get the answer to my earlier question about how you archive a feeling.
Exactly.
You can go on a forum and read a thread from 2005 where someone isn't just listing the tracks played at a specific warehouse in 1994. They are writing paragraphs about the condensation dripping off the ceiling right as the bass dropped.
Painting a picture.
Yeah, they are describing the specific smell of the fog machine or the sheer exhaustion and euphoria of walking out into the daylight. They are translating the nonverbal communion into text.
And the MMR column highlights the beautiful irony of these unofficial archives. To understand this massive cultural movement today, Historians cannot rely on official state documents.
Right?
They must rely on unlabeled cassette tapes. They have to study low-resolution, grainy VHS rips that someone recovered from a damp basement somewhere.
Like total bootlegs.
Yeah. They have to piece together history from the anonymous, memory-based set lists posted by random users on long-forgotten forums.
It is incredibly precarious, but it's also perfectly fitting.
It really is.
An underground culture is being saved by underground, unpolished methods. I mean, a pristine, multi-track, professionally mastered studio recording of a 90s rave would actually be a historical lie.
It would. It would be real.
It would strip away the grit, the danger, and the reality of the physical space. The low-res, amateur nature of the preservation is the most authentic way to save the culture, because the medium of the archive reflects the DIY spirit of the original art.
Exactly. Now, moving from the global internet landscape, the source forces us to examine how these challenges manifested in specific geographical locations.
Okay.
Japan, in particular, faced unique and severe hurdles in preserving its scene, introducing an entirely different layer of complexity to the archiving effort.
How so?
Well, the MMR column points directly to a specific piece of legislation. It's called the FUEHO, or the Entertainment Establishments Control Law.
Right. Under the FUEHO law, dance clubs were legally classified as adult entertainment.
Yes.
Which, I mean, that classification drastically alters the atmosphere of a venue. You aren't just going out to hear music. You are stepping into a legally, heavily regulated, morally stigmatized space.
Completely. And that legal framework turned the simple act of taking a photo or video inside these venues into a massive taboo.
I can imagine.
It wasn't merely a cultural preference to avoid the media like we saw in the UK or Germany. It was a matter of survival for the Japanese venues.
Wow.
The source specifically highlights the scenes in Shibuya and Roppongi. Bringing a camera into a club could trigger a police raid, shut down the venue, and result in actual arrests.
So the stakes were way higher.
Way higher. Even the dedicated music magazines of the era in Japan, publications like Loud and Ella King, which genuinely wanted to document the culture, they could only capture a microscopic fraction of what was actually happening behind those closed doors.
So what does this all mean? If the attendees can't film, the venues forbid photography, and the sympathetic magazines are legally restricted from showing the reality, it sounds like the 90s Tokyo raves are essentially ghost stories.
That's a good way to put it.
If there is no physical proof, you are forced to rely on urban legends to prove the culture even existed.
The source addresses that exact sentiment. It states quite poignantly that the 90s Tokyo raves exist almost entirely in memory.
Man, just in memory.
Yeah, they are ghost events in the historical record. However, there is an active modern pushback to reclaim that history before the generation that lived it forgets entirely.
Right.
The text mentions citizen movements that successfully fought to revise the FUEHO law. They battled to legitimize club culture so it could operate openly, without the constant shadow of legal taboo and police intervention.
And beyond the legal victories, there is the actual archiving work happening on the ground in Japan today.
Yes, tons of it.
The source details the emergence of the Japan Rave Archive and various grassroots Zine projects. Archivists are desperately trying to track down and preserve whatever rare surviving footage exists from legendary megaclubs like Shibuya, WMB, and Age Hawk.
These places were huge.
Exactly. For context, these weren't small basement bars. These were massive, cavernous meccas of the scene. The fact that events holding thousands of people could leave almost no visual trace is staggering.
Hard to believe.
The archivists are racing against time to piece together the memories before they fade completely.
And while Japan is currently organizing these massive efforts to catch up, the text notes that overseas archiving has been systematically underway for years.
Right.
This global effort forces a critical reevaluation of our established definitions. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the MMR column uses these archiving projects to fundamentally challenge what we consider historical heritage.
Yeah, because when someone says cultural heritage, the immediate mental image is like a marble building.
Yes.
We picture a curated museum exhibit behind bulletproof glass, protected by a velvet rope, officially sanctioned by a university or government.
Right. But the argument presented here is that archiving culture can no longer be restricted to institutionalized state-sanctioned history.
We have to look wider.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We must broaden the definition to include these seemingly disposable artifacts, the memories, the low-res digital fragments, the personal interpretations, the raw passion of the underground. These elements must be recognized as a new, vital kind of cultural heritage.
Yeah.
Consider the specific examples from the text. You have the Rave archive, established back in 2007 by ravers, who realized their youth was disappearing and decided to become self-taught archivists.
That's dedication.
Or the archive of old rave flyers, which meticulously documents pieces of paper from the US and Canada between 1989 and 2000.
I mean, we are talking about thousands of physical flyers that were handed out on street corners, stuffed under windshield wipers, and explicitly designed to be thrown in the trash the very next morning.
Literally garbage to most people.
Exactly. By collecting and preserving them, these grassroots archivists are democratizing history. They are declaring that a crinkled neon flyer from a 1995 warehouse party holds as much cultural significance for this community as a recognized historical document does for a nation.
Yes.
It tells you who was there, what they valued, and how they communicated.
It represents a profound shift in how we assign value to human experience. The source posits that our society, having grown up alongside rapidly evolving media technologies, is entering an era where we must look past traditional official media to figure out how to save our true culture.
Right.
The living archive is built by the people who actually sweat in those rooms, rather than by academics looking back a century later trying to guess what happened.
Bringing this all together for you listening, why does this matter to your life?
Good question.
Maybe you are a massive fan of electronic music, or maybe you have never listened to a techno track and prefer classical piano. Regardless of your musical taste, this deep dive reveals something fundamental about the human condition.
It really does.
Preserving human history isn't always about deploying high-definition cameras or securing official government documentation. Sometimes, the most honest, accurate history is simply the collective passion of regular people working together across the globe to piece together the fragments of a shared feeling.
Beautifully said.
It is a testament to the lengths we will go to say, we were here, we created something beautiful, and it mattered.
And taking that thought a step further leads to a fascinating paradox for our modern society. Reviewing the related columns listed at the bottom of the MMR source material, two specific topics stand out.
Oh.
Yeah, zines, which are very physical, limited run, intensely personal DIY magazines, and Burning Man. The Burning Man comparison is incredibly illuminating.
Oh, totally. Think about the original concept of Burning Man in the Nevada desert.
Right.
It is a massive temporary city built with the explicit foundational rule of leave no trace.
Exactly.
Much like the 90s raves, it was an event designed to be fiercely experienced, physically burned to the ground, and then disappear back into the dust. It was the ultimate art of experience.
But look at what it has become today.
Right.
It is arguably one of the most massively documented, photographed, and endlessly Instagrammed events on the planet.
You can't escape the photos.
You can sit at home and take high-definition virtual reality tours of the playa without ever getting sand in your shoes.
It's crazy.
This transformation poses a deeply uncomfortable question for us to consider. The defining characteristic of our modern era is an overwhelming anxiety to record everything.
We really do.
Our absolute default reaction to witnessing something beautiful is to pull out our smartphones. We document our meals, our concerts, our conversations. We record our lives to prove that we live them.
Well, the 90s ravers had the absolute confidence to live entirely in the moment, knowing the moment was enough. We seem to have, lost that confidence.
Exactly. Have we lost the ability to create art that is unapologetically unrecorded?
Oof, that's a big question.
Can a true, unarchivable 90s-style rave, a pure art of experience, even exist in today's digital landscape? Or does the very act of pulling your phone out of your pocket instantly destroy the fragile phenomenon you were trying to capture?
If you record the magic, do you kill the magic?
That's the question.
That tension between experiencing life and documenting life is something that is going to stick with me the next time I am at a concert, or even just at a beautiful dinner with friends, and I instinctively reach for my phone.
Yeah, me too.
I want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you. Keep looking for those hidden histories in the unlikeliest of places. And we will see you next time.